So I guess it's appropriate territory to go out there every few days and talk about the 1 year laters, because while this summer is going to be filled with a lot of great content and a lot of news, we will have a few breaks on air because not everything happens during the summer. So let's go out there with some filler content in today's video and go over to the top of the 2023 NHL entry draft. We had already made one year later video talking about the 5th overall pick, David Reinbacher and the Canadiens. So in this one, let's go out there and jump up to number 1. Because in the 2023 NHL draft, we had ourselves a generational talent get selected in the 1st overall spot. Connor Bedard, ladies and gentlemen, our favorite mod on our stream and one of the best 17-year-old hockey players on the planet in the past 20 years or so. Now, you see, 1 year later works in a very particular way. We talk about what these players were like before they were drafted, we talk about what they were supposed to be, and we talk about how they performed in their seasons after the draft. But I think with Connor Bedard, we kind of have the right to skip a lot of that, because for the most part, Connor Bedard was as good as advertised, almost to an underwhelming degree. You see, heading into the 2022-2023 draft season, everybody knew that Bedard was going to be a menace. He had just come off of a 100-point season in 62 games played as a U17 WHLer. Fantastic. He then put up 143 points in 57 games played, 71 goals, 72 assists, had 20 points in 7 games with the Regina Pats, and 23 points in 7 World Junior games. You gotta remember, this guy was 17, turning 18 years old. He put up 3 points per game in this World Junior tournament as a 17-year-old. You rarely see guys get this amount of points at 18, 19, 20. So the fact that Bedard did it at 17 was game-breaking stuff. He broke records, he cemented himself in the history books, and he had more assists than most people had points in the tournament. I say most people because there was only one other player in the entire tournament that had 14 points, and that was Logan Cooley. Bedard had that amount of assists and the most goals in the entire tournament as well. There is no other way to encapsulate just how gosh darn good Connor Bedard was in his draft year. And everybody knew he was going to be first. It was not a surprise when he was taken first. And as his season went on with Chicago in 2023-2024, you started to see some of the warts of the team showcase themselves off. You see, Bedard, for the most part, I think, had a pretty good year. 61 points, 68 games played, 22 goals, and 39 assists as an 18-year-old. He led the Chicago Blackhawks in scoring. He was number 1 in goals, he was number 1 in points. That is not a surprise in the slightest. But when you watch Connor Bedard and the way his season went, you kind of couldn't help but feel bad for the guy in a way, because he made his NHL debut and he played and he looked good. He looked very good. And in fact, it was so good to the point that you could tell that this guy was, for sure, the superior player on the Chicago Blackhawks forward core throughout the entire season. I mean, there were some other guys that missed time. Taylor Hall was out for an extended period, which definitely shaped the way the rest of the season would go for Chicago. But for the most part, Connor Bedard was, ironically, a man amongst boys. The rest of the Chicago Blackhawks, spared Jason Dickinson, couldn't really score much. They didn't really produce much offensively. They didn't have nearly the same level of offensive creativity that Connor Bedard did. And even though he had himself a Calder-winning year, and even though he was just under a point per game, I feel like it's kind of fair to say that Connor Bedard's numbers and his point production in 23-24 wasn't really indicative of his total skill set. If he was just playing on a better team, if he just had better line mates that were more consistent, and he played a full 82-game season instead of getting knocked in the jaw by Brendan Smith on New Jersey, Connor Bedard realistically could have had, let's say, an 80-point season if everything else worked itself out properly. The way he played and the way he adjusted throughout the year was in that point-per-game-ish territory caliber of a player. Not that his point production this year was underwhelming, but it's just kind of scary because you think about it and you're like, yeah, things could have been way better for this guy. if the Chicago Blackhawks just built a better forward core around him, if Taylor Hall just hadn't been injured, if the Corey Perry drama didn't result in that guy leaving and going over to Edmonton, if this team was just better, Connor Bedard could have been better too, and he still had a year that was worthy of the Calder Trophy. This season, he also played for the Team Canada World Championship squad. He had 8 points in 10 games played, which is kind of nuts, because that's a pretty good point production metric. Again, international tournament, 18-year-old guy, but the same thing applies to that. Because when you watch that tournament, you look at the games, sure, Bedard had some shootout goals tossed in there, he had some moments to shine, but you could very well say that the way Team Canada was deploying their players, Connor Bedard wasn't really used as much as he could have been in those scenarios. There were moments in overtime where Bedard didn't get a shift. There were offensive opportunities that Bedard just wasn't tossed out onto the ice on. There was some weird way the Canadian squad was being coached, and a lot of people would criticize that particular aspect of their organizational makeup from this World Championship tournament. So for Connor Bedard, honestly, I feel like even though he had a very solid season, the point production was there, the impact was felt, Chicago fans know what this guy is about, they're seeing one of the most talented prospects and rookies in their system since Patty Kane and Jonathan Toews do his thing. While he had a fantastic year, I can't help but feel like next season there's so much more that we can watch as hockey fans unfold. I feel like there still is so much untapped potential out of Bedard. I feel like for now, he could be seen as the NHL's biggest mystery. Because next season, it's not going to be, oh yeah, like, is he going to be okay? Is he going to be good? No, we know he's going to be good. The question is, how good? Because the Chicago Blackhawks, I mean, the rest of the guys, they have a few younger players on their team. They are getting older. Taylor Hall, hopefully he's able to recover and play the full season. Connor Bedard, of course, we hope that he's able to stay throughout the entire year, too, for 82 games. We want to see that longevity progress in his career as well. So if Connor Bedard plays a full season with a team that's supposed to be better, if Artem Levshunov, who had just signed his ELC, ends up playing and he's good, if Tyler Bertuzzi, who was just acquired by this team in free agency, and Teuvo Teravainen are able to inject even more offensive prowess throughout this forward core, you have to think Connor Bedard could go from 60-something points in 68 games to maybe even 80 or 90 points next season. He could do that. He is that good. His season prior was honestly kind of underwhelming if you're looking at it based off of just raw hard point totals, especially when you actually watch the games and you see, hey, this guy is living on another planet compared to all the other Chicago Blackhawks players. He is so much superior than everybody out there. So add Tyler Bertuzzi into the mix, add Taylor Hall into the mix, add Teuvo Teravainen into the mix, give an extra year of development to guys like Philipp Kurashev, to guys like Andreas Athanasiou, to guys like Kevin Korchinski, to guys like Alex Vlasic, to Lucas Reichel even. There's a lot of opportunity for things to go so much better for Connor Bedard, and it's just going to be a question as to how better. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below about Connor Bedard and this entire situation of him and his season. How do you feel about his career and his progression 1 year after the draft? I'm calling him the NHL's biggest mystery for 24-25. Because the possibility does exist, albeit I'd say it's a very low possibility, that Bedard has a sophomore slump. Let's say he produces only 50 points in 80 games played. Let's say another one of these top guys gets injured big time and it affects the way the Blackhawks are able to play. There are situations outside of anybody's control that could dictate a poor Connor Bedard season next year, but I'd say it's very unlikely. He's too good for that to happen to him. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as to the NHL's biggest mystery, in my opinion at least, in Connor Bedard, and what you think he could do next season. How do you feel about his career after the draft? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.